All right, so Photography 2, again, is one of my favorite classes that I teach in the photography program, especially right here at the beginning because right after Introduction to Photography, you're starting to get comfortable with your camera, you're getting comfortable with the mechanical aspects. Obviously, everybody's not a master of their camera and the capabilities of their camera, but you're much more comfortable with it than you were when we started. And you will continue to get comfortable with it, especially this semester, because we will be shooting lots and lots and lots of pictures, which is basically how you get better at photography. You understand foundational principles, and then you start to put those into practice. You make a few mistakes, you understand where you're getting your mistakes from, and whatnot, and it's just one big circle of learning new stuff, realizing you need to learn more stuff, and then continuing to learn more stuff, and then realizing you need to learn more stuff. So it's a fun cycle. This is a really cool, hobby. Very cool area to work and to grow, and I hope everybody has a good time this semester. All right, so I'm not going to read through the whole syllabus. You have access to it, but I will point out a couple of key features to this. As far as class times and days we meet, nothing's changed. Everything's the same. Okay, Photography 2 is really just a continuation of Introduction to Photography. The only difference is we have a few different things that we're going to be doing. We will not be in this physical room every Monday and Wednesday, or excuse me, every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll talk about that a little bit in just a minute. Our course times or dates are March the 5th through May the 2nd. May the 2nd is the day that we will wrap this semester up. Our lecture and demos, again, are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Open lab time, if you need to come in and work, or any time on Mondays and Wednesdays, or really any time on Tuesdays and Thursdays that you are not in another class. If you do not have your own computer and you do not want to work, or if you do have your own computer and it's not as fast as these computers, this will be a semester that you will probably be up here a little bit more than you have in the first half of the semester, because our workflow consists of a few more steps this semester, and we'll be doing a lot more shooting. So email's the same, office phone's the same, office hours are the same. I do have to put office hours on here. Do I see a lot of students between 7 and 8? Not really. If I do, I know it's extremely important. And if you need to catch me outside of those times, again, obviously you can catch me anytime that I'm not in class. Photography 2, students continue, I'll just read this. Students continue to study photography through technical skills and theory. Topics include exposure control, advanced lighting techniques, and portfolio building. There are not a lot of competencies that the state wrote, is that right? The state written, I don't know what it is. Whatever, the state has organized for us to teach this semester. We cover a lot more than this semester. I kind of like that they're vague on this a little bit. We cover a lot more than this semester. We'll talk about that in just a second when we break this down. Textbooks, tools, and supplies. Obviously, your camera. You have to have your camera. You will definitely need a tripod this semester. So if you have not bought a tripod yet, you need to go ahead and get one. Some things that we shoot this semester will require slower shutter speeds. Some things that we shoot this semester will require you to stay perfectly stable from shot to shot to shot. One reason is because we'll be stacking images, or we will be stitching images together. So a tripod is going to be crucial this semester, so make sure that you have one. We will be using the same books that we've used the first half of the semester, Complete Digital Photography, and the Adobe Photoshop Lightroom Classic book. These are the two books we used in intro. If you looked at the syllabus first thing Monday morning, the one thing that I forgot to do was change a couple of things down here under the photo mounting materials. I have updated that, so if you were one of those people that clicked on those links and immediately went out and ordered stuff, you ordered the wrong thing. So, and that was my fault. I made it unavailable as quickly as I realized it. So, if you did, we'll take a look at this in just a few minutes. The only two things that you need, I have everything else, is going to be some pre-cut 8x10 picture mats. We will be printing and mounting some 5x7 images, and then we just get larger every semester, all the way up to 11x14 prints on 16x20 mats. So we'll look at that one of our last semesters. This semester we print 13 by 19 contact sheets for a lot of the things that we do. That's where we're able to do some critiques, do some evaluations of your images, and then choose the images that we're going to want to print a little bit larger, which would be 5x7 prints. And when we get to that point, I will make sure that everybody has access to these. These aren't super expensive. It's $16 for 10 of them. So that comes with the window mat, the backing board, and also clear bags that you can slide your stuff into. I like to use white the first semester, and then we will transition towards the last semester. We'll transition over to black. That just gives you the ability to work with different color mats. We'll possibly do some off-white ones next semester in our studio, and then we get into black ones, much larger during portraiture and documentary. So you can take a look. You can take a look at those, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in a few weeks. One thing that you do not need, but I put it on here anyway in case you started having questions about this, is a speed light. I have a speed light that I would recommend. We have access to those in the studio. We won't really get into speedlight based photography this semester, but I will point you to what we will be using and talk to you why I recommend this one. It is a little more expensive than most really inexpensive, cheaply made speed lights, but you have a lot more control over it, and it communicates well if you start to upgrade your lighting systems. If you go into portraiture or anything like that, they communicate well. So you do not have to buy a speed light. The only reason I put it on here is I will point you to one specifically. Actually, I'll point you to three, but I will point you specifically to one that you will be using here because we have access to them. And then if you want to do that and upgrade that, that would be completely up to you. But there's nothing to buy this semester. If you already have a camera, you already have a tripod, you already have your books, the only thing that you will have to buy this semester is $16 worth of pre-cut mats. Does that make sense? Giovanni? Okay, cool.
Well, just any kind of scissors work, or I mean, is it specific type of scissors?
No, any kind of scissors will work. As long as they're sharp and will cut paper, we're good to go. I will provide the printing paper. I will provide the ink. I will provide the tape that we use for the mounting tape that we use. I have rolls and rolls and rolls of it, and I will provide the white gloves, the linen gloves that we will use in order to mount all of our stuff. So we'll get into that a little later on. The breakdown of the grades, I think it's the same as Introduction to Photography. Semester assignments count for 80% of your grade, and then your final exam and your portfolio count for a total of 20% of your grade. Everybody did, as far as I can tell, everybody did very well on their final exam for Introduction to Photography. Very proud of you guys. Y'all must have a good teacher. And also, anything else up under this in terms of work ethics and whatnot, just read through it. Counseling, honor pledge, pretty much all of this stuff is the same. I'm not going to spend the time to go through all of that. You can take a look at it. All right, what we want to look at and what is basically a breakdown of our semester. Our semester starts today. We're going to pick up today right where we left off last week. We're going to do our syllabus review, which we're doing right now. We've got a couple of housekeeping things that we're going to do for your folder structure, your contact sheet, and your collection set inside of Lightroom. We will do that next. And then we will immediately jump over to Advanced Exposure and finish up our demo that we started last week and wrap that up. Thursday, we have a 1-hour photo shoot here on campus that we will be talking about a little bit. Probably won't look at it today, but we'll be talking a little bit about it as soon as we get here on Thursday. We will be looking at printing contact sheets. I have not printed your contact sheets from last semester or your last contact sheets from your edits yet, because I've got a couple of people that are still putting stuff in there. I'm planning to print those tomorrow so that we can look at them for our critique and our guidelines. So I need to make sure that everybody has their stuff. You will learn how to print contact sheets tomorrow. They're pretty easy. We will have a schedule set up for you to sign up to come print your contact sheets. We try to do a lot of printing. We do some critiques up here on the board, but most of the things that we do from prints, because I think it's just a little bit more important for you to be able to see your stuff in print, and for your students, your fellow students, to be able to see your stuff as well. Next week, on the 12th and the 15th. The 12th, we're doing a composition basics and fundamental of light. Those are our two big topics that we're going to hit. Compositional basics is really kind of an overview of composition, and then we will spend the rest of the semester digging into a few of these different areas of composition where we will be shooting. Our second photo shoot of the semester will be next Thursday. That's going to be downtown. Yes. Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I put that date wrong. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's supposed to be the 14th. So the 14th, 3/14, which is my birthday, excellent, is we're going to have a photo shoot downtown. We'll be shooting for an hour, and then we will be coming back here for the last hour where we will be talking about white balance, global editing, and our Lightroom workflow. But instead of using images from our Chapter 6 assignment, we will be using that information to edit the images that we shoot from our downtown shoot. We'll be shooting a lot of pictures this semester, so make sure that you're ready to go with that. Couple of things that I want to point out. Being able to meet and being able to demo causes problems. Not really problems. Causes logistical issues this semester a little bit. So there's a few things that I want to make sure that I point out to you, especially for weeks 3 and 4. Our demo lecture will be on Blackboard those weeks. That content will be made available to you on the 14th. And you need to have watched that content and gone through that information before we meet out on location on the 19th. So on the 19th, we'll be doing a theme photo shoot on location. I will be sending out a list of where we will be meeting, and based on what you go through on Blackboard, that's what we'll be talking about on location. It's just easier if you've already gone through the stuff and we don't have time to do it all in class and get out on location to take pictures. So our big topic that we're looking at on the third week, you will go through that online. We'll meet out on location. We'll have a quick breakdown about what you looked at. We'll talk about it together on location, and then we'll go out and we'll start taking some pictures. We'll meet back here on the 21st, which is a Thursday, and we will be looking at Chapter 7 in your Lightroom book, which is Painting with Light. That's when we get into masking and different things like that in Lightroom, looking at some color adjustments as well. We'll be looking at some special effects. We'll be doing the same thing on week 4, going through our demo on Blackboard, making sure that we meet out on location, talk about that content, and then go out and shoot. We try to get out of the studio as much as possible, or out of the lab as much as possible this semester. The week of the 5th, which is the 2nd and the 4th, the week before spring break, I will be out of town. The labs will be open. I will have something for you guys to do in the book. If you want to come in and do it here, if you want to do it home, if you've got a computer that's good enough to run the content, you can go in and you can do that there. And then you'll be off for spring break the following week. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. Week 6, we will be talking specifically about soft proofing and prepping your files for print. We will have already printed our contact sheets from week to week, but we will be talking specifically about high resolution printing and prepping for mounting. So week 6 is all about printing. You will be doing a theme shoot. It will not be as a class, but it will be a specific topic that you can go out and do. And then we will be meeting on that Thursday to talk about mounting our prints together and walking through that workflow, and then having a in-class critique. Week 7, we'll be shooting on location. Again, we'll be talking about 2 big topics, HDR photography and panorama photography. Putting images together is the easy part. Shooting can be difficult a little bit, especially if you do not have a tripod. So make sure that you have a tripod. Some of the stuff that we shoot this semester, you could probably get by with just handhold shooting. Week 7, you cannot handhold an HDR. Cannot do it. You could possibly fudge it, but it really depends on how slow your shutter gets. In panorama, you could possibly do it without a tripod, but the more images you take, you may be limiting yourself shot to shot. So definitely make sure you absolutely have a tripod by week 7, okay? And not coming in and saying, hey, my tripod's coming in on the 24th. Well, too bad, we've already shot it at that point. So make sure that you have your tripod, I would say, by spring break. Okay, if you think you're going to want to shoot some stuff at slower shutter speeds this semester, I'd go ahead and get one. Okay, and then our final is going to be broken down into 2 different sections, possibly 3. One of them will be a final exam. Think about it a lot like the content or the structure of your first final last semester, except this one is going to contain a lot more exposure calculations and different things like that. Not parts of your camera, but just general photography related stuff. Some stuff that we covered in photography 1, or intro to photography, and then most of the stuff that we cover in photography 2. And then we'll have our portfolio review, which I'll remind you, and we'll start to set up a little bit in week 6. The plan is to do a book and to print the book here. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll also have some prints that we're going to be printing and mounting from the semester as well. And as always, you'll see this on every one of my syllabi. Schedules subject to change. If I feel like something needs to be moved around, I will move it. I won't move it without telling you. So just make sure that you kind of keep up with that. And does anybody have any questions? Yes.
By the end of the semester, do we need to purchase a portfolio book?
No. There's going to be nothing to purchase. We will, as we get closer to week 6, we'll start talking about it. But it will be a book that we lay out in Lightroom and we print here. So nothing to buy. So, yes.
Week 4, I will not be here.
Okay. If you will, shoot me an email when we get closer, just so I'll know. All right. Any other questions about the syllabus? Yes, ma'am.
Did you put the tripod down, that a suggestion?
We looked at tripods a couple times last semester. Yes, I can point you to a couple. Okay, I'll point you to a couple. All right. Any questions about the syllabus? Is everybody good? Awesome. All right. All right. Let's do this. In the Start Here section, let's go ahead and I want everybody to click on this course folder. So in the Start Here section in Blackboard, if you clicked on the syllabus, it opened it up in a new tab. You just have to go back to the Blackboard tab. You should have a couple of tabs open across the top of your we want to click on course folder. What it's going to do is it will begin downloading and it will go to your downloads folder. So if you take a look in your Finder, open a Finder window, just come down here to the Finder, click on Finder, go to downloads, and you're going to see, you should see a 2705.zip file. Does everybody see that?
Mine's already open, but
Yeah, that's fine. It'll either be a file or a folder. Some browsers unzip it automatically, some do not. But what we're looking for is after you've clicked on that link, course folder, it should download it immediately and it's going to put it in your downloads folder.
I don't have the zip.
That's fine. Do you see something that says 2705?
Yes,
Okay, yeah, that's what we want. Does everybody get that? Yes? Okay. All right, so let's take this Finder window. Let's move it over here. Move it out of the way. Or actually, let's just do this. Let's go to this 2705 folder. If you have a zip file, all you've got to do is double click that zip file. It'll unzip it and you'll see this folder. Does everybody see that? Okay, all we want to do is right click on that folder and go to copy. Right click on that 2705 folder and go to copy. Navigate to your hard drive and into your DMPT courses folder and right click and paste that folder inside of the DMPT courses folder. You should have two of them now. You're going to have a 1020 folder, which we worked out of last semester, and you're going to have a 2705 folder, which I gave you.
You said double click?
No, just double click to unzip it. So you right click on it to copy it, and then you go to your DMPT courses folder, and then you right click to paste it inside of that folder. You can also drag it and drop it to it if you want to do that. Is everybody good? Okay. Inside of this folder, I have already created a folder structure for you. Okay. There is a Behance exports folder, which we will use to, when we export our images for Behance, this is where we'll put them. There's a contact sheets folder. So let's go through this together. Inside of the contact sheets folder, there is a templates folder. Okay, we will be importing all three of these templates in just a few minutes into Lightroom. But this contact sheets folder is where you will save all of your contact sheets for the semester. Does that make sense? And then we just have a week 1, a week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and week 6 and 7 folders. They're all empty, but the structure's here. This is the folder that you're going to be working out of this semester. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. I meant to do that for 1020 and I didn't, but I'll do that from here on out just to make sure that we all have the same folder structure from semester to semester so nobody gets lost. Okay, did everybody get that? It's on your hard drive. Excellent. Does anybody not have that? Speak now or I will assume you have it. Is everybody good? Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's open up Lightroom. Same way we always do. Go to your LR catalog folder. Go to your Lightroom catalog. Double click on your Lightroom catalog. And it's going to open that up in Lightroom. Okay, so again, this is the same way we've always done it. You go to your hard drive, you go to your library, you go to your LR catalog folder, you go find your Lightroom catalog, and you double click it to open Lightroom. Once you've done that, you go to Lightroom. You do, and you can go out of your Finder window. So go in, double click, open up your Lightroom catalog, and this is where we're going to get started. Is everybody good?
I think I'm in the wrong one.
No, I am.
There should only be one. All right, so make sure that we're all together. You should only have one Lightroom catalog. There shouldn't be two, there shouldn't be three. There should only be one, and it should be inside of your photo library folder. Inside of your photo library folder, you should have a courses folder and a catalog folder. That catalog folder should contain your Lightroom catalog, which is this file right here. Got a lot of helper files, but there's only one LR cat file. That's your catalog. Okay, that's the same file we have been opening for 8 weeks. Okay, so make sure that you know where that is. Double click on it. Lightroom will open up, and I want you to go to your library module. Okay, we're going to go to our library module. All right, here we go. Here we go. Is everybody good? All right. Couple things we should see real quick. One is you should see inside of your folders panel. Does everybody see their folders panel? Okay, inside of your folders panel, you should see your hard drive, whatever your hard drive is. This is mine. And I should have 2 top level folders. I'm going to have a 1020 folder, and then I'm going to have some class files for edit. Those are the 2 folders that we drug in last semester. Now, inside of this folder, you're going to see a lot of other folders. There'll be like a week 2, a week 3, a week 4, a week 5, a week 6, a week 7. How organized this is depends on how organized you were last semester. Okay? Hopefully, this new folder structure that I've given you will help us out with this, and we'll make sure that we have that in just a few minutes. Now, what I want you to see is down here up under the collections panel. Okay, up under the collections panel, we should have a collection set called DMPT1020, Intro to Photography, and then a class files to edit collection. Does everybody see those? Up under your collection sets. Okay, collections panel, collection set. I know it's a collection set because it's a box. Now it can be expanded or collapsed, and you'll see all of your other collection sets or collections inside of this. But I want you to collapse that 1020 collection set. Just go ahead and click on that little arrow. You'll see all of your other collection sets and collections collapse into this collection set. We're not concerned about that one right now. Did everybody see that? Did anybody not see that? No?
No, please. I collapsed it.
Okay. All right. So up under the collections panel, this is where we want to go. Let's do this together. Over here in the top right-hand corner, we want to click on this little plus sign for collections, and we want to create a new collection set. Create collection set. We're going to name this DMPT2705 dash photography, and I can't spell photography, yeah. Photography 2. We do not want it inside of another collection set. We just want this to be our collection set, DMPT 2705, Photography 2. We're going to click Create. You'll see it pop up right over here as a new collection set. There's nothing in it. There's nothing in it, but we do have that collection set. All right, is everybody good? Anybody not have that? Okay, good. All right, so again, all we've done so far is created a new collection set. When we work this semester, most of the time we will be working out of a collection. So we'll do a few of these together to make sure that you're comfortable with it. The only other thing that we had is to make sure that your 1020 folder is collapsed. Okay, make sure your 1020 folder is collapsed. Once we start shooting assignments, which we will start on Thursday, we will pull in our first folder, our 2705 folder. We'll pull that one in, and then we'll have something in here in Lightroom on our hard drive as well. All right, last thing I want us to do in Lightroom today is let's go to the print module. Let's come over here to the template browser, and you should see Lightroom templates and user templates. Does everybody see those? I want you to right click on user templates, and we're going to go to import. Navigate over to your contact sheet templates folder that I gave you. And we want to select all 3 of these contact sheet templates. So all the way to the contact sheet template folder. Click on the first one, hold shift, click on the last one. Okay? And we want to click import. Okay. Again, if you didn't get it, just go in, select them all, click import. It's going to put them all in here. I didn't mean to import them twice. Need to go back.
I don't have an import.
You don't have an import?
Scroll, make that bigger, or make that, just kind of move
All right.
it.
Everybody get it?
Yours doesn't say import down at the bottom.
Do I have it on the wrong one?
You got it on the wrong one. Click back on Lightroom. Just click on your Lightroom. That's where you want to find it. You want to find it in that one. That one should say import.
This one?
Yeah, so you just got to go to your folder. Go to your hard drive. Go to your class folder. There you go. Go to your courses folder. 2700, 2705, contact sheet, template. All right, select all three of those and click import. All right. Is everybody good? Do it now? I don't know what you're saying. Do what?
This is like and we just drop them into the user template.
Nope. All right. So after you right click on user templates and go to import, you select all three of your contact sheets and you click import. Okay, now what you're gonna see pop up, and I got a bunch of them, and I'm sorry that mine looks a little unorganized, but I do have a lot of contact sheets. What you should have are these three. You're gonna see one that says 2705 contact sheet. Does everybody see that one? It looks identical to the 1021. That's because it is. Same contact sheet. Okay? Same contact sheet, same information. Okay? You will also see one that says 2705 CS prints. Okay? Click on that one. That one is going to allow you to see 20 images with the file name on your contact sheet. Okay? So when we print contact sheets this semester, we will be printing them on 13 by 19 paper, 20 images. And then from those 20 images, we will be able to share these with classmates. We will be able to choose the image that we want to print larger. And then we will use this as our contact sheet for making those specific decisions. So when you turn a contact sheet in on Blackboard for class stuff, this is the contact sheet that we'll use. When we're printing a contact sheet, this is the contact sheet that we'll use. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. And there's also another one called High-Res Portfolio. It's just a single image. We won't get to that one until a little later on into the semester, but I did want to give you access to this one. Okay. And we may not use this one at all, but we'll see. We may make adjustments to it. We'll see. I've got another contact sheet that I will give you once we start printing 5x7 images, but I didn't want to give it to you yet. Okay, I want us to set that one up together so that you know how to set a contact sheet up as well. Is everybody with me? Does anybody have questions? All right, you can click on Lightroom Classic up here at the very, very top and go to Quit Lightroom Classic.
I have a question.
Yes.
All right, so on the top 20, all 20 should be on one sheet.
You talking about from last semester?
Gotcha.
Oh, you had the wrong. Oh, I got you. You had the wrong selected. All right. Any questions? Is everybody good? Excellent. All right. It is 9:02. I'm gonna give y'all an 8-minute break. Take you a break. Be back at 10 after, and we will start our demo on the second half of Chapter 8. Got a couple things we're going to do, and then I'm going to cut you loose.
I was using the wrong little link to Lightroom the entire time.
That was probably a problem.
Yeah. So should I like continue using that link since it has all my stuff in it? Because it's not different in any way. It's just a different thing.
Let's look at it.
So this is the one that you told me to use and all that kind of stuff. And I have it over here. Go to sources. And so
So you have been using the whole one?
this is the right one now.
Okay.
That's why it doesn't have a lot in it. It's okay. I just continue using it.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Is that
Because
right?
we won't use anything from last semester.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll start. We'll have all new pictures to shoot. Mm-hmm. Is everybody good? Anybody need some help with anything before we get started in just a few minutes?
You printed out our pictures and everything?
Doing it
Did you print out pictures and everything?
tomorrow. Yep. Yep.
I got to go.
Okay. All right.
I see.
See you. Is everybody back? Missing anybody? Okay. All right. We're gonna pick up where we left off, and also dig a little deeper into manual controls. We'll do a couple of different scenarios just to make sure that everybody is comfortable. There's only about 9 slides, so not a whole lot to wrap this up. You will be looking at a few things on my Lightroom account or inside of my Lightroom catalog, but you won't need to open yours back up unless you just want to see some specifics. So where we left off for part 2 is we talked about this a little bit, and I want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with exposure value. Exposure value, we looked at this. This is one of the slides we looked at last week. Exposure value is a combination of values of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and this is used to control brightness. So we know that there are 2 areas of the exposure triangle that control light reaching the sensor. That's aperture, which is controlled by the size of the opening, and shutter speed, which is controlled by the amount of time that the shutter is open. We know that we have a volume control for that light in ISO, which allows us to make our sensor more or less sensitive to the light that's coming through the lens and past the shutter. Okay, so that value is going to be rendered across our exposure value indicator. Okay, and we looked at this last week. Okay, and we talked about this last week. Our exposure value indicator is going to be located either on your LCD screen if you're using it to shoot with, or inside of your viewfinder. When you have your viewfinder up to your eye, you should see this exposure value indicator. Okay, and it allows you to see basically if your image is rendered at what the camera deems a normal exposure, which would be 0, or if it's deemed overexposed by stops or underexposed by different stops. Okay, so we know when something is underexposed, then our exposure is getting darker. We know when something is overexposed, our exposure is getting brighter. Bright elements get brighter, dark elements get brighter, dark elements get darker, bright elements get darker, depending on what side of the scale this thing is on. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so these adjustments control the amount of light entering the camera, aperture, and shutter. ISO is going to control how sensitive the sensor is to light. So is everybody comfortable now with the exposure triangle, or in concept, the exposure triangle? Is everybody good with that? Okay, cool. All right, now let's get into the fun part. Everything that we shoot this semester, unless I tell you differently, and it's not because I think it makes you a better photographer, it just makes you work a little bit harder for your images, and working a little bit harder for your images with the knowledge that you have now will in general make you a better photographer. Okay, the goal of this was not to get us to manual and keep us in manual. The goal is to get us in manual so that we become more confident in how to read light, how to control the exposure of that light in camera, and then when we're faced with different shooting situations, figure out which shooting mode, which exposure mode we should be in. Should it be program mode? Should it be full manual? Should it be aperture or shutter priority? Should it be bulb mode, which we haven't even talked about yet? So where we want to live this semester, unless we have a specific project that will require us or be a little bit easier to shoot in a different mode, we will shoot everything in manual. Okay? Is everybody with me? Okay, again, it's not because I think it makes you better. I do feel in the long run it does make you better because you have to work a little bit harder to get your shots. Is everybody good? Okay, all of these slides also are on Blackboard. I will open that folder up as soon as we finish with this demo today. Okay, so manual. Manual mode gives you, the photographer, complete and total control of all three areas of your exposure triangle: your aperture, your ISO, and your shutter speed. No particular order. It gives you access to all of those. Okay, in manual mode, your camera should have one control for changing each area. Okay, now, if your camera, and we've looked at this already because we've been kind of in and out of manual mode, just kind of playing around and getting comfortable with it. We'll take your cameras out in just a second and make sure that everybody knows how to access all three areas of your exposure triangle on your specific camera. Okay, so we'll look at that in just a few minutes. All right, so you can set these to anything you want and take a picture. Okay, which means in manual mode, it is possible to take an image with a very bad exposure. So if you don't understand how to dial exposure in manually and how to get those readouts and read those readouts on your exposure level indicator along this scale, then you're going to struggle a little bit here at the beginning of the semester. Okay, but you should get more and more comfortable with this as we go. Okay, so yes.
So as you're adjusting each thing and you know, press it halfway down, and you look at that meter, and it's to one side or the other,
Yes.
you just change those adjustments because you want to be at 0.
Well, not always, and that's where we're going.
Okay.
That's where we're going with this. Okay. All right, so this is what we want to do. So the light meter and the exposure level indicator are going to be your best friends in manual. Okay, so we looked last week. Let me go back to this real quick. Where is this at? Last week, we looked at metering patterns. Okay, when you push your shutter release, the button that you press to take a picture, when you push it halfway down, two things happen by default. One is wherever your focus point is set, focus is locked. Okay, if we're in one shot, it's going to lock focus on wherever our focus point is set. Is everybody with me on that? Second thing that happens is it's going to meter the light within your frame. Depending on which metering mode we have accessed or dialed in on your camera. So by default, it should be set to evaluative metering. And if you remember what we talked about last week, evaluative metering is basically where your whole frame is broken up into all of these little cells, okay? And values of brightness and darkness are read across your whole frame. And then exposure is averaged across all of these cells, okay? And your meter reading pops up along your exposure value indicator saying if this is at 0 or if this is at 1 over or 2 over or 3 over or 4 over or whatever it may be. It's telling you based on the values that you've dialed in for aperture, shutter, and ISO, where your light is falling or where it's being metered across that range. Is everybody with me on that? And then once you know where that is, that's when you can start making decisions on what you need to make adjustments to. Okay? Do you need to change your aperture? Do you need to change your shutter? Do you need to change your ISO? Which direction can you move it? How should you move it? How many clicks do you need to move it? So all of these things are going to go into the decisions that we make when we're ready to shoot in full manual. Okay? Is everybody with me? All right, let's look at this real quick. All right, where is my... let's take a look at this. This is one thing that we looked at last week just a little bit. Okay, and I had the question a while ago, do we want everything, let me get a new layer. Do we want everything, of course I don't have my thing set up, here we go. Do we want everything here? The question is not always, or the answer is not always. Okay, this is what's happening. When you point your camera at a subject and you meter, your exposure level indicator is going to pop up somewhere along this scale. Okay, when we looked last week, if it pops up and it's got like an arrow pointing this way, that means that you are more than 3 stops underexposed. If it's pointing in this direction, that means that you are more than 3 stops overexposed. That means that you have too little light or too much light. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so if you take a look at all of these examples right here, and you'll see this again in just a few minutes. If you take a look at all of these examples of this one scene, this is this one scene shot at, let's just start here, at normal exposure. Okay? So we rendered a normal exposure for this. We dialed our exposure in, took this picture when the exposure, oh my gosh, I hate this mouse. I hate this mouse sometimes. We set this when the exposure was reading at 0. Okay? Now, the thing about that image though, to me, that looks too bright.
Yes, still a little.
Okay? That looks too bright. That means, do I always want to shoot at what my camera deems normal exposure? And the answer is no. Okay? No. I want you to understand this. I want you to listen closely to this. And I'm not saying this because I don't think that you guys are understanding this or anything. I just want to make sure you hear me straight up. I am not telling you that every image that you take has to meter at 0. It does not. I don't want you to think that this is correct and both of these areas are incorrect. Okay? Big X. That is not what I'm saying. Okay? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, based on what you're wanting to capture, will determine whether you need to dial in a normal exposure or whether you're wanting to dial in something that's overexposed or whether you're wanting to dial in something that's underexposed. If I had to look at these two images right here together, I would say 1 stop underexposed is a better exposure of this than this one.
Yeah.
Okay? If we look at these two images, I think this is a little bit dark, but man, look how the blue sky pops out. So it's really on what your subject is and what you're trying to convey. Okay? I'm not telling you, hey, everything you shoot has to be on 0. I'm just letting you know that when your scene is exposed and you take your shot and you feel like it's too bright, all you have to do is dial in what's called exposure compensation. Okay? This is exposure compensation. Your camera is going to do a really, really good job for the most part of reading the amount of light that's coming in and helping you get to a normal exposure. That's what your camera does when you shoot in full auto. Okay? When you push your shutter release halfway down, your camera is calculating the light and it's telling you, okay, well, if you want to get this and you want to shoot it around 0, you need this aperture, this shutter speed, and this ISO. And if there's not enough range, I'm going to have to pop the flash up. That's what your camera is telling you, not verbally, but mechanically. Does that make sense? Okay, so when we exited out of full auto mode, we start to make some of the decisions. When we're shooting an aperture priority, we're telling the camera, Aperture is king or queen, whichever. Aperture is king or queen, whichever. That is the most important area of the exposure triangle. I have to shoot at f4. I have to shoot at f16. I have to shoot at f2.8. That's the most important thing. Now, you tell me, camera, what shutter speed I need to be at. You tell me, camera, what ISO I need to be at. Okay? Those are somewhat manual controls, but still more auto shooting modes. Aperture priority and shutter priority, S or TV, whichever one your camera says, are still kind of sort of auto modes, but they are great modes for photographers. You just can't shoot them this semester unless I tell you to. Does that make sense? And it's not that I don't think they're good modes. I just think that you're going to learn more in the long run when you got to work for it. Okay, that's what I want. Is everybody with me so far? All right. So again, do I want all of your images to be shot at 0?
No.
Okay, I heard one person.
No.
Okay, excellent. Am I saying that when you turn in a shot and it's 2 stops underexposed, am I saying that it's wrong?
No.
No. Okay, what about 2 stops overexposed? Is that going to be wrong? No. Okay, it's not going to be wrong unless
It looks like that.
unless this is not what you meant to capture. Okay, there's a lot of detail that's lost
Yeah.
in a shot that's completely overexposed. Okay,
So that kind of would be wrong.
it depends.
Cause
It depends on the shot, and this is such a crazy thing about photography.
yeah.
I want you to hear me on this. Hear me good. Okay? When we're looking at photography, we're looking at it from a couple of different standpoints. We're looking at it based on your creative vision or your client's needs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? 2 completely different things. You may be one of those photographers that likes to shoot a lot of stuff overexposed. Totally fine. You may be one of those photographers that likes to shoot stuff darker and it comes out underexposed, but your images are real moody and it looks good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's not wrong. The only time that it becomes wrong is when your client needs something specific and you shoot something completely different, and that doesn't satisfy your client's need. That's when exposure's wrong. Does that make sense? Everybody? Okay, so when we're looking at this, when we're dialing in exposure manually, there's a couple of things that we want to keep in mind. We looked at this a little bit the other day. Okay, we looked at this a little bit the other day. And again, I'm not saying certain exposures are right or wrong, but we need to know what's controlling these. Okay, so scenario number 1. I go out on location. Okay, I turn my camera on. I am in manual mode. Okay, I'm in manual mode. I take a meter reading. Okay, let's say from the last shoot that I was at, when I turned my camera off, my camera was at f8, 500th of a second, at 100 ISO. Okay, and I meter my scene, and let's say with the scene that I came up on, let's say that it metered 3 stops underexposed. Okay? Is everybody with me? All right, so let's say I'm hand holding. As soon as I tell you that I'm hand holding something, what becomes important? Okay, shutter speed. There's actually 2 things that become important. Okay? Shutter speed is one of those. Okay? Focal length is the other. Okay? If you remember all the way back to when we first started shooting and talking about the exposure triangle, we made sure that we understood the difference between shutter speeds at different focal lengths. Okay? So if we've got a camera and we've got a lens, and I'm just putting this because most of you guys shoot with an 18 to 55 millimeter lens. Is everybody with me on that? Okay. What this means is that based on the focal length and the focal length range that this lens gives us, if we're shooting at full focal length, we do not want our shutter speed to drop below 1/60th of a second. Okay? Remember, the easiest way to understand the minimum shutter speed is that your shutter speed should be at least equal to your focal length, but usually it's better if it's doubled. Okay, so what this means is if you're shooting at a 50 millimeter, you really don't want your shutter speed to drop below about a 50th of a second. 60th of a second is really the range, but you would really want it to be double that, which would be around 100. Okay, is everybody with me? So within that range, a 50th or 60th to 100th of a second for your shutter speed is really the range you want to be in if you're shooting with your 18 to 55 millimeter. And again, this is when you're hand holding. Is everybody with me? Okay, if I was shooting at 300 millimeter and I'm hand holding, I would want my shutter speed to not drop below a 300th of a second, but really I would want it to be somewhere around a 600th of a second. So 300 times 2. Does that make sense? So if you have a telephoto lens or anything like that, and some of you guys do, the further the more you're zoomed in, the larger your focal length. If you're hand holding your shots, you want to make sure that your shutter speed is at least at that point, but better to be almost doubled. Is everybody with me? Yes.
So, if you've got your telephoto as far out as it'll go,
Mm-hmm.
and you're hand holding,
Mm-hmm.
and you take a shot of the moon,
Mm-hmm.
is that why it comes out fuzzy? Is because you're hand holding?
Usually the best way to photograph the moon is with a slower shutter speed. Okay? And what I mean by that is if you can get your camera stabilized
Right.
and you can shoot at smaller apertures, which means a really, really small opening for a longer period of time, like 2 seconds or 4 seconds or 10 seconds, you can usually get a much sharper image. Okay, one, because you have a really, really and again, you can still shoot at f8. You can still shoot at f4. Okay, because the moon is so far away. But what's gonna really determine this is how steady you can keep your camera.
Right.
Okay, how steady you can keep your camera. So if you can stabilize it and shoot at really, really fast shutter speeds, that's fine. But usually you want to be able to stabilize your camera so that you don't get any camera shake. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so let's get back to our scenario. All right, so we're hand holding. Okay, I'm hand holding. Let's say that I don't want my shutter speed to drop below a 60th. That's my go-to. Okay, so if I'm 3 stops underexposed, and I'm like, I kind of want a medium depth of field. So let's say that I do want to live around f8. Okay, but my image is 3 stops too dark. What can I change?
ISO.
Okay, what can I change? I can change my shutter speed, right? So if I go from 500 to 250, how many stops is that?
1.
Okay. If I go from 250 to 125, how many stops is that? Okay, so that's 2 total. If I go from 125 to 160, how many is that? Okay, so that's 3. That's going to put me at 0. And what that tells me is that F8 at a 60th of a second at ISO 100, okay, is going to get me back to 0. Okay, is everybody with me? Okay. I take the picture. Okay, I take the picture. And I feel like the picture's too bright. Okay, what can I do?
Change the ISO.
Change it down to 125.
Ooh, which does what?
Underexposes it by one stop.
Why?
It underexposes it by one stop.
Why?
Oh, because you're making it slower. I mean, you're making it
Faster.
faster.
Oh my gosh. All right. So F8 at 125 at ISO 100 is going to put this one stop underexposed. Because this isn't at 0, does that make it wrong?
No.
No. Is this making sense? Is this making sense? Okay. So when we go in and we begin to dial in exposure, you need to know what aperture controls. Aperture controls depth of field, right? You need to know what shutter speed controls. Shutter speed controls the speed of the shutter, right? These are your 2 areas that you can have complete and total creative control. The only time you want to change this is when this is hindering you from shooting at the aperture and the shutter you need to. Okay? So I want you to think about it like this. When you're out on a photo shoot, you need to determine, the first thing you need to determine is this. Based on my subject, what 2 areas of the exposure triangle are the most important? Am I looking for depth of field, or if I'm looking for motion capture? Right? If I'm wanting to freeze a fast moving subject, which of the 2 is more important? Shutter speed, right? If I'm wanting to capture movement and I'm wanting to introduce a little bit of blur into my shot, which of the 2 areas is important?
Aperture.
If I'm wanting to capture blur,
Shutter speed.
shutter speed, right? Okay, so everything that deals with image blur or motion blur has to do with shutter. If we're wanting to capture the blurring movement of a subject, or if we're wanting to freeze the movement of a subject, shutter speed is the most important. Okay? Is everybody with me? Okay? If depth of field is the most important for my subject, if I'm wanting to capture my subject and a little bit of the environment that my subject is in, what of the 2 areas of the exposure triangle are the most important? Aperture. Okay? If we're wanting to capture the amount of information that's in focus, the depth of field, aperture's king. Okay? If I'm wanting to capture my subject and completely blur my background out, which of the 2 areas are the most important? Aperture. Okay? Aperture. Aperture controls depth of field. So when you're choosing your subjects, okay? When you're choosing your subjects, you have to ask yourself, which is the most important? The depth of field or movement? Depth of field or movement? Depth of field or movement? That's what you're asking yourself. Whenever that's important, that's the first one you set. Okay? That's the first one that you set. Okay? Here's my next scenario. I go out on a photo shoot. I found a really, really cool subject. Okay? Really cool subject.
Is it moving?
It's not moving. Okay? Here we go. That subject is stationary. Am I spelling this right? Man, I'm awesome at spelling. That subject is stationary. Okay? that subject is also right up against, let's just say it's right up against a wall. And what I'm really wanting to do is capture a shallow depth of field. So instead of shooting it right up against that wall, I'm going to kind of go over to the side of it and shoot it down that wall. Is everybody with me? Okay? So I'll give you a visual. Okay? This is my subject. We're overhead looking at it. My subject's standing up against a wall. I don't want to shoot it from this direction. I'm going to shoot it from this direction. Is everybody with me? Okay. And as I'm shooting my subject in this direction, I notice there's a big blue porta potty back here. Okay? Is everybody with me? All right. So, what's one thing I can't do? I can't go move the porta potty, right? Okay? And let's say that there's something on, let's say right here, that won't allow me to shoot the subject from this direction. Okay? Is everybody with me? So I have to shoot it in this direction. What is the most important of the two areas of the exposure triangle? Why? Because I need to get that porta potty out of my shot. Can't do it by moving. Can't do it by moving the porta potty. Can't do it by moving my point of view. Okay? So aperture is the most important. I've decided I want to shoot at 2.8. That's going to give me a shallow depth of field. It's going to allow me to set my focus on my subject, and by the time it gets back here, that subject is going to be blurry. It's just going to look like a big blue blob. You won't know it's a porta potty. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's say 2.8, and let's say that my shutter speed was set at 125th of a second, ISO 100. I set this up, I metered my shot, and it metered 3 stops overexposed. What does that mean?
Too bright.
It's too bright. Okay, it's too bright. All right. What is the only thing I can change? Or excuse me, what's the first thing I need to change? Why?
Well, that's the only thing.
Okay, all right, so here we go. So if I'm 3 stops overexposed, what do I need to do to my shutter? Do I need to slow it down or do I need to speed it up?
Speed it up.
Why?
Because you don't want as much light coming out.
And what does speeding it up do?
Make it faster.
It makes it faster, but what does that do? It restricts. There you go. It lets less light hit the shutter. Okay? Can't change the aperture. Aperture's locked down. What happens if I change the aperture? What happens if I go from 2.8 to 4?
And see the porta potty.
Whoo, depth of field's going to change, right? That porta potty's going to come in focus a little bit more. I don't want that, right? So the only thing that I can change is the shutter speed. Where do I go with it?
To 160. To 1,000.
Oh my gosh. All right, I go 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops. That puts me back at 0. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. I take the shot. It's a little too dark for me.
So back it up.
It's a little too dark. I think I want to be 1 stop over for this particular shot. What do I do?
I go back to
Where?
the shutter speed, 500.
Oh, so you're telling me that 2.8 at 500th of a second at ISO 100 is going to put me right here. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that wrong?
No, it's not wrong.
Is it wrong exposure-wise to shoot 1 stop over?
No.
No. Is this making sense? What if I go to 250? Where am I going to be?
That porta potty might show up.
Nope, I'm still 2.8. I'm still 100. What happens if I go to 250? Somebody said it. I'm 2 stops over. Okay? What if I go, and I'm like, for some reason, let's say I bump my ISO up to 200. I'm right here.
And you're at
What would happen then? If I left it at 500 and I accidentally bump my ISO and I take my shot, where's it going to meter? Oh my gosh. Eureka!
Cause it's gonna let in more light.
It's letting in more, it's not letting in more light, it's just making my sensor more sensitive,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So what you want to do, there are 3 areas to the exposure triangle. There are 2 that you can control creatively. Okay? You only want to hit that ISO when you can't shoot it at the aperture and the shutter that you want to be at. Last scenario, and then we'll get back. Last scenario. All right. It is at night. Okay? I'm walking around. I want to take a picture. I am hand holding. Not Hilton Head. I'm hand holding. All right. Okay, here we go. I'm hand holding at Hilton Head Island. All right. All right. I need to shoot. We're walking around. I need to take a picture of my kids. We're out at the beach. It's just starting to get dark. There's not a lot of available light. And I want to take a picture. And I want the ocean in the background a little bit. Okay? So what's going to be important to start off with? I want a picture with my kids and the ocean in focus. What of the 2 areas of the exposure triangle are going to be important? Aperture. Why? Because it controls what? All right. I want to be at f8. Okay? I want to be at f8. So I say, hey, I want to be at f8. I've got my camera set to ISO 100. Okay? And I take a meter reading. Let's just say that my, let's say it pops up at f8, 60th of a second, 100 ISO. Okay? And it pops up, hold on. It pops up, let's say 4 stops underexposed. Okay? It hits 4 stops underexposed. Okay? Now, I'm shooting at the depth of field that I want to be at. So do I want to change that? No. So aperture is locked down. I'm hand holding. I do not have a tripod. And my shutter speed is already at a 60th of a second. Can I change that? No. Shutter speed's locked down. Okay? What is the only thing I can change? Okay, so in order for me, this is what I want you to understand. In order for me to shoot at f8 at a 60th of a second, I have to change my ISO. Okay? I can't slow my shutter down because my image will blur. I can't open up my aperture any further. I could, but I would lose my depth of field. Is everybody with me? Okay? So, where am I going? Only direction I can go, right? Up. How many stops? 200. That's 1. 400. That's 2. 800. That's 3. 1600. That's going to put me dead at 0. I take the picture. Still a little dark. Okay? It's still a little dark. Okay? I have a decision to make. What am I introducing into my shots? Noise. I'm introducing noise into my shot. Remember, I'm taking that volume control and I'm turning it up. You with me? Okay? So I go from 1600 to 3200, which puts me 1 stop overexposed, but an image that looks better because it has enough light. Is everybody with me? These are the decisions we have to make as photographers. Okay? I could, if I take that picture and I'm like, man, that's way too noisy, I would have to sacrifice one of the other two areas to get that exposure. I wouldn't want to hand hold it at slower than a 60th. So I would have to sacrifice the depth of field. Okay? If I didn't want to go from 16 to 32, I could leave it at 16 and go to f8. Okay? That would do what? That would restrict the amount of light by another stop, right?
You mean 5, 6?
I mean, 5, 6.
I'm already confused.
Yeah, really. Sorry. Okay? So if I went back to 16 and then I went to F4, that's going to blur my background a little bit more, sacrificing my depth of field. Hopefully you can still tell they're at the beach, right? Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
I love that tool.
Do it now.
The tool you're using.
Me too.
I like that tool. That and smudge.
That and smudge are cool. All right. Any questions?
That's how I created my own Windows poster. I did.
Yeah.
Taking that little one, smudged it up.
Cheater. I'm just teasing. All right, so here we go. This is what we're looking at right now. This is what we're looking at. This is your exposure level indicator.
Is that Bigfoot?
Yeah, yeah. This is your exposure level. It does look like Bigfoot. This is your exposure level indicator. Your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And this is what we're looking at. Okay? So when you're taking pictures, you want to make sure that you understand what each of these areas control. You want to set your aperture and your shutter speed to where they need to be. And when your camera will not let you shoot at the aperture and the shutter speed that you need to be, that's when you have to start making the adjustments to your ISO. Okay? So if
That
I...
last scenario, the ISO, you couldn't bump it up anymore and you had to sacrifice the depth of field.
Yes.
So
Yes.
That's when you
So...
pull that basically.
Yes. So what we have is if we have to shoot at f4, okay? We have to shoot at f4. And let's say we've got plenty of available light. And let's say our shutter speed comes back and it's a 2,000th of a second. At ISO 100, totally fine. Okay? If it drops down to 500th of a second, totally fine. If it drops down to 250th of a second, totally fine. F4, 250th of a second, ISO 100, totally fine. The problem is when you are shooting and it's not allowing you to shoot at the aperture and the shutter speed that you have to be at. If aperture's king and you have to capture that depth of field and you're hand holding and the amount of light that you have won't allow you to go below a 60th of a second, that's when you have to start bumping your ISO up. I can't shoot any slower than a 60th because I'm hand holding. Is everybody with me? If I'm faster than a 60th, no problem. If I'm slower than a 60th or 300th, depending on my focal length, that's when I have to start making compensations to allow me to shoot at the aperture and the shutter that I want to be at. Is everybody with me? Okay. Now, I threw this in to your slides as well. Exposure compensation is one of those things that I do want you, that you hopefully did read about in Chapter 8. We can control exposure compensation, which is basically going under or overexposed by a certain number of stops. Same as if we're shooting manual, except our camera makes the decision on what it's going to make the adjustment to, what it's going to compensate with. So if I'm shooting in shutter priority, I've dialed in my shutter. If I need to compensate and be 1 stop or 2 stops over or 1 stop or 2 stops under, I can compensate for that, and it will usually change either my shutter speed or my ISO. It'll usually change my shutter speed until it can't change it anymore, and then it'll change my ISO. But I don't really want to get into that yet, even though you've read about it. Let's stick with manual right now, And as we get into scenarios where we need to be shooting in shutter or aperture priority, we'll come back and we'll talk about compensation. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, cool. So you'll see some slides that we didn't go through yet. I want to make sure that you just take a look at that. All of the stuff that we're looking at are things that are in your book in chapter 8. This is what I want us to see. The last thing that I want us to see is this right here. This is your histogram. Okay, this is your histogram. Okay, the histogram is a graph, and we've talked about this a little bit already. Histogram is a graph of the distribution of tones in your image. Okay, we're going to break this down in Lightroom in a second. Histogram is simply a bar chart, okay, showing how much of each shade of gray is present in an image. Okay? Okay? With each vertical line representing one shade. So this is what we have. All the way to the left-hand side of our histogram is solid black. Complete black. All the way to the right side of the histogram is solid white. Complete white. There's nothing past this. Solid white, solid black. There is no detail in your image in those areas. It's just solid white, solid black. Is everybody with me? Now, everything in between is where we start to see details. So the way that you read a histogram is it will show you how many black, shadow, midtones, highlight, and white, that range of tone is in your image. And when you see the peaks getting higher, that means that there's more of those values in your image than there may be of others. We see if we look at a histogram here, there's a little bit of black. There's a lot more shadows than there are black. There's a little less midtones until we start to get to the brighter midtones, to the highlights, and then there's a lot of brighter highlights. And then it starts to taper off where there's a few solid white, and then we get down here to the solid white, and then there is few areas that are completely white. Does that make sense? Okay, so the reason that your in-camera histogram is useful is that it can tell you when an image is over or underexposed. Okay, so when we're shooting, and we're going to look at this in your camera in just a second. Exit out of this, open up Lightroom again. I want you to take a look at this real quick. Anytime that we select an image over here, let's go to, I'm going to go to my develop. All right, anytime that we select an image over here, what you're going to see is histogram. Okay, now on this histogram, let me go in here. We'll leave it like this. Every time you click on an image, what it's going to do is it's going to render out that histogram. Okay? Now, on this histogram, what you're going to be able to see is two arrows or two triangles. One's going to be over on the right side, one's going to be over on the left side. The one on the left side is your shadow, or excuse me, is your black. The one on the right is your white. What this shows is something called clipping. Okay? Does everybody see this? Clipping is indicated with two different colors when these two indicators are on. It will show up as solid red if you have clipped to white, and it will show blue if you are clipped to black. That means that those two areas in your image have no detail. They're solid black, they're solid white. Okay, now the reason that this is important is when we start making adjustments to our exposure and we start moving our sliders to change the orientation of our tones. What we're doing is we're either introducing more black or more white into our image. And if we've got our clipping indicators on, it will show us the areas of our image that are solid white or solid black. We want to be very careful when we have areas that are clipped in our image. Doesn't mean that you don't need areas in your images that are clipped. It just means in those areas, there's no information. It's solid black or it's solid white. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So when we look at our histogram from image to image, you're going to see that the histogram is going to represent everything that's as far as tonal range or value in our image. In an image like this, we don't have a lot of black, we don't have a lot of shadows, we don't have a whole lot of midtones. But as we get over here to the highlights and the white in this image, you see that this is a really, really bright image. Okay? If we were to take our exposure slider, which we'll be talking a little more about on Thursday when we recap chapter 6, if I take that exposure slider and I start to move it to the left a little bit, take a look what's happening to my histogram up there. Okay? Not only am I making my image a little bit darker, it's because I'm shifting those tones from one side of my histogram to the other. That's making my overall image a little bit darker. If I keep sliding it all the way over, it's going to make it underexposed. If I slide it all the way over this way, it's going to make it overexposed. Is this making sense to everybody? Okay? Now, this is the kicker. When we shoot these images, we take these images, we want to pay attention when we pull these in the Lightroom or on the back of your camera to your histogram. Because a lot of times, especially when we're shooting on really, really bright days, guess what's kind of hard to see on your camera? Your LCD screen, right? Okay, if it's really, really bright, sometimes it's hard to see that. One way to check to make sure that your image isn't too overexposed or too underexposed is to take a look at the histogram of your image. Okay, does everybody have their camera? All right, good. Everybody go grab your camera real quick. All right, your image preview button on your camera allows you to preview images that you've already taken. Everybody press that button. All right, so on the back of your camera, let me turn the light back on so I can see. On the back of your camera, you should have another button that says like display or info or something. What that's going to do is it's going to pull up additional information about your image. Okay, so click on your image preview button. Okay, and then press your display button. Okay, when you press your display button, you should see your histogram. Maybe, if you have access to it, your histogram should pop up on the back of your camera. Okay, so we've got our image display. Which one is it? I want to say it's that one.
Click.
Click it again.
I believe it's the arrow buttons.
On an icon?
Yeah,
Which one is it?
like the arrow buttons. I believe it's up.
Push down.
We just once
Push
go
down.
through all the info.
Just takes that thing down right here or something. Not all cameras will give it to you. And some cameras will show you your histogram, and then some will break it down into individual channels of red, green, and blue. Okay? So push your display button again. That's your histogram. Okay? So what that's going to do is it will allow you to take a look after you've taken your image. It will allow you to see how your histogram is going to be rendered on your image, to let you know if there's really, really bright values in your shot or if there's really, really dark values in your shot. We'll be doing a lot more looking at the, or we'll be looking a lot more at the histogram as we move forward this semester. One thing I want you to make sure that you understand, though, at this stage is two main things. I need you to understand how the exposure triangle works. Okay? And I think that everybody does because of what we just covered, and we just ran a couple of scenarios. But I also need you to understand what you're looking at when you see the histogram. Does everybody understand how to read this? Okay? So black on the left, white on the right, and then it goes from black to shadows to midtones to highlights to white, or either white to highlight to midtone to shadow to black. Does everybody understand that? Okay, cool. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, do you change, when you're taking pictures, you don't have time to look at your histogram every time?
You don't. Okay, that's an excellent question, by the way. All right, the cool thing about shooting in manual is this. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of different scenarios. Let's say that you're just out just doing general photography, taking pictures for a class assignment. Okay, the cool thing about shooting in manual is that once you have dialed in your exposure, okay, for that lighting situation, you usually don't have to do a whole lot of anything else, okay, unless your light starts to change. Okay, so now if I were shooting inside and then I go outside, obviously that's going to be a shift in light. Is everybody with me? But if I go outside right now and I start taking pictures, okay, and I'm taking pictures of a specific subject, once I've dialed in exposure, unless I'm wanting to change my depth of field or if I'm wanting to change my shutter speed to capture motion, there's not really a whole lot I'm going to have to do. Now, once the light starts changing, or if I go inside of a building, I'm going to have to dial in exposure for that lighting situation. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So once you get comfortable, or once you find a subject that you want to take a picture of, and you dial your exposure in, the next time you go to take a picture, you're already going to be kind of in the range that you need to be at, unless you need to make a creative decision. I need a more shallow depth of field. I need a more large depth of field. I need a faster shutter. I need a slower shutter. So right now, what I would encourage you to do is don't choose subjects for your shots that require you to make really, really fast decisions to capture them. Don't go shoot a football game. Don't go shoot well, you can't shoot football games right now. Don't go shoot a baseball game yet. Don't go shoot a NASCAR race. Don't go shoot, just stuff like that. You want to be real careful right now, making sure that you can dial in, and I usually like for you to shoot stationary stuff right at the beginning, just so you can take the time to think through what your exposure needs to be. Okay, speed will come. Okay, but don't jump in the deep end of the pool yet. We're kind of wading out in the, we still got our tippy toes on the bottom of the pool right now. We can still stand up. Don't go jump off the diving board in the deep end yet. Just think about your subject. Think about how you need to dial your exposure in. Dial it in. Take your shot. Take a look at it. Figure out if you want it to be brighter or darker, or if it looks good the way it is, and then dial it in the way that you need it to be. Okay? Is everybody with me?
Yes. I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're shooting in full manual, are you still half pressing the shutter?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
All you're doing is when you half press that shutter, instead of looking immediately at your exposure triangle, when you half press your shutter, let me pull this back up real quick. When you half press that shutter, you're looking at where this little arrow is popping up at on your indicator. This is what you're looking at. That's a great question, by the way. This is an excellent question. When you've chosen your subject, okay, when you've chosen your subject and you're ready to take a picture, and you press your shutter release halfway down on your subject, this is what you're looking at. You're looking at where this exposure level indicator is popping up. If it pops up over here, you know you need more light. If it pops up over here, you know you need less light. Knowing where this pops up is all the information that you need to dial exposure in, as long as you know what your exposure triangle is doing. Does that make sense? Is everybody with me? Does anybody have any questions? That was excellent.